Parenting has a way of changing a complete thing, doesn't it? It changes your schedule, it changes your energy level, your priorities shift, your conversations change, and if you're not careful, can also change your marriage. Many couples don't drift apart because of conflict. They drift apart because their entire world slowly reorganizes around their kids. Welcome back to the High Ticket Woman. I'm Debbie Caudle. Today, we're going to talk about how you can parent together with your spouse without losing each other in the process. We're going to talk about how marriages slowly over time become child centered, how to stay united even in discipline and decision making, and how to protect your marriage when life feels chaotic. And I really want to anchor this conversation in scripture because that's what it's all about. What does God actually say? So we're going to use the verse in Proverbs 22, verse 6. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. This verse is often quoted about children, but embedded in it is something really important that I don't know that we focus on much. Children are trained within a system, and that system begins with the marriage. You ever just stopped and thought about that? Before you had kids, you had each other. Now, we're not talking about blended families. That's a whole nother podcast episode. We're talking about you and your spouse came together, you got married, you decided to have a family. Most parents don't wake up one day and decide, we're going to sideline our marriage and make our kids the emotional center of everything. No, it's usually a whole lot more subtle than that. Okay. It starts with necessity. The early years of having kids it demand total attention. When babies arrive, the family system changes overnight. Okay. Babies require constant physical care, round the clock attention, being emotionally tuned into their needs all the time, and immediate responsiveness, especially for moms where biology and bonding play a major role here, right? Woman's body, hormones, nervous system, they're all wired to orient towards the newborn's needs. And there's nothing wrong with that. That focus is absolutely essential and designed by God. And so what starts as a necessity can unfortunately become a permanent reorientation if you and your spouse aren't intentional about it. And it's not that the marriage disappears, it just sort of now gets postponed. Because as parenting demands increase, couples slip into survival mode, don't they? Life just begins to focus around getting through the day, getting enough sleep, managing logistics, dividing tasks, keeping everyone fed, clothed, and functioning, and at the right spot at the right time on the right day. Okay. So conversations begin to shift, don't they, between you and your spouse? They shift from connection to coordination. Instead of asking, "Hey, how are you doing? How are we doing?" It becomes, "Did you grab the diaper? Oh, who's picking them up? Who's taking them to practice? What time is practice?" And all of that feels really, really normal in the moment. It feels responsible. But over time, that functioning replaces intimacy. And let's be honest, this often happens with us as women first. We often shift our emotional focus to our children first, not because we don't value our husbands or our marriage, but because our children need us in a way that our husband doesn't. Mind you, babies don't wait, do they? They don't self-regulate. They don't delay their needs. When they need to eat, they need to eat. When they are tired, they're tired. When they are hurting, they're hurting. So our attention focuses on the loudest and most immediate demand. And if our husband doesn't know how to stay emotionally present during that time, if he pulls back, if he feels rejected or replaced in any way, and he's not trying to re-engage with us intentionally, well, then that gap that's starting to grow, it just begins to widen over time. And unfortunately, modern parenting culture can really unintentionally reinforce this shift because we'll hear messages like, kids come first always, and good parenting sacrifices everything, and marriage can wait, but kids can't. Well, okay, that sounds noble, but it leaves out something really, really crucial. And that is this: children absolutely need parents who know how to stay connected to each other despite all the craziness that having kids can bring into your life. When parents absorb this message that somehow prioritizing their marriage is selfish, they then what happens is they often silence their own relational needs with each other until often it can feel too late. Resentment, loneliness, disconnection, all of those things begin to surface years later. And I've seen it too many times where one or the other of you doesn't feel like you can come back from that. When I work with couples and I ask, sometimes I'll ask couples to identify, like on a pyramid, their most important relationships. And it's shocking to me how many times parents will put their kids before their marriage. Okay. The thing is, a child centered home is pretty damaging. It doesn't happen through one decision, it happens in 1,000 small ways. Skipping date night just this one time, or collapsing into exhaustion on the couch every night instead of finding time to sit and talk with each other. So now you're putting off conversations. And oh yeah, you're saying this is just a phase, but it's not months that have gone by now, it's years that have passed. And you didn't choose this disconnection that's happened, you just drifted into it. Well, this is really, really key. And I'm not saying any of this to make you think to feel like you've failed in any way. Okay. Wherever you're at in this process, you can realign. The goal here is to make sure that your family structure is anchored on the right thing. Okay. We want you to be loving parents for sure, but your kids need you to anchor your family in a different way than on them. All right. Obviously, at the core of your family structure, your family system, it needs to be God. Always anchor your family with God at the center. And then alongside that, a united marriage. Not because your children don't matter as much to you, but because they flourish when the foundation of your marriage is strong. I like this metaphor of building a home, and your marriage is what you build on. So what's the first thing you do when you build a home? Well, you pour the foundation, right? So if that foundation isn't solid or it's not firm, what happens to the structure that's built on top of it? It's it's unstable, isn't it? Well, that's what having a child-centered home is like. It's the foundation of the marriage. If you're not tending to the marriage, that foundation is going to weaken, and the stability of your kids is going to be impacted by this. And here's where you know you have a child-centered marriage, a child-centered home. Your conversations primarily revolve around your kids. Decisions are based almost entirely on your children's preferences and your children's schedules. And your schedules are packed with activities, leaving no room for the two of you. And your emotional energy and your physical energy is spent on parenting, not partnership. Okay. When that happens, you're functioning more like co-managers than spouses. Now that can feel loving. You can still feel like you're loving each other with a child-centered marriage, but it really isn't sustainable because honestly, your kids were never meant to carry the weight of being at the center of the family. And you were never meant as husband and wife to operate in the background in your own home. A strong marriage does not compete with good parenting. A strong marriage supports good parenting. And children don't need parents who revolve around them, like moons around the sun. No, kids need united parents. Kids thrive in families where there is clear structure, where you and your spouse lead, where your marriage anchors the home, and where children are cared for and guided and protected within that stable system. Okay. When your marriage is strong and united, your kids feel safe because now they're not responsible for holding the family together. Here's what happens when kids become the center. All right. Your decisions revolve around your kids' mood. Oh, we've already talked about this a little bit, but in addition to those other things, their moods, their preferences, their reactions, their comfort level. For a second, if you have kids, how many times you've done that? My child's upset. My child needs to eat. My child needs to go to do this activity. And I'm going to put my marriage and my own needs secondary to what my kid needs. And what this does is it subtly teaches your child that their wants and needs and their feelings determine the emotional temperature of the home. That's pretty overwhelming for a child. Children they're not wired to manage adult systems and adult things and adult emotions. When kids sense that family harmony depends on them, their anxiety increases. Even confident kids can feel pressure that they don't really understand. They don't comprehend it. They just feel it. They become hyper aware of conflict. They can become overly responsible. They can become emotionally reactive or can worry about disappointing you. And while you're feeling like I'm prioritizing my kids, I'm putting all my energy, all my focus into my kids, my kids' well-being, that can feel like a lot of pressure to your kids, right? You've made them the center of your world, and now there's hyper attention on how well they're doing in school and how well they're behaving and et cetera, right? The other thing kids learn that's not healthy in a child-centered home is that relationships in general orbit around them. We don't want that. We want them to learn how to join relationships, not be the focus of them. Because as they grow up and become adults, if they feel like they're the focus of relationships, then they have difficulty sharing emotional space with others. They feel discomfort when attention shifts away from them. They might have unrealistic expectations from other people and partners. They might have a lot of confusion around how to compromise and what reciprocity and mutuality look like. But in a marriage-centered home, children grow up understanding that relationships involve give and take. Oh, and love isn't always about being the focus or the center of attention. Good connections include mutual respect and healthy boundaries. And how do they learn all that? Because they see you and your spouse choosing each other. And that teaches them how healthy partnerships look. Unfortunately, we're raising a generation of entitled and, yes, somewhat narcissistic young adults. And this is why, to a large extent, we've made them the center of our universe. Children are meant to be loved, not leaned on. That's another one of the dangers of a child-centered family. It's emotional enmeshment that happens, okay? Where we open up to our kids for emotional support. We make them our confidant. They are the ones that have to be the stabilizers of parental stress. I remember as a kid feeling this way myself. Sometimes my mom would talk to me about problems that she and my dad were having. And say I was a teenager by this time, but still, at 15 or 16 years old, I had no idea what to say to my mom. that felt like a pretty heavy weight to carry. And I know that there are parents out there who are doing that. They are confiding in their children about things, even when your children are adults, confiding in things that your kids don't want to know. They don't need to know. That is stress they do not need to carry, right? Kids don't need to feel needed in that kind of way. They need to feel protected. There's that stability again that we're talking about. When you and your spouse are united, your kids are free to be kids, to grow, to explore, to try and fail and get up off their feet and try again and mature without carrying all that adult emotional responsibility. So, in a healthy family, the marriage functions as the emotional center. Okay. You are the leaders of the family system, not the kids. The kids need to see you communicating, respecting each other, repairing conflict, prioritizing time with each other. That's what helps them internalize their own sense of safety. Because now they know, hey, the family rests on something solid, concrete foundation, marriage. They don't have to manage it. They don't have to fix it. They don't have to hold it together. And that's what tells your children that they are deeply loved and that they're not responsible for you and yourself. Okay. One of the most destabilizing things for a family is when you and yourself are divided. Different rules, different consequences, different expectations, different leaderships. And so that's something we need to talk about too. Okay, because unity doesn't mean you always agree on everything, especially not right away. But you do have to commit to being aligned before you implement. Okay. And there are three really key areas where this is important, where you and yourself have to talk about things and and decide on a plan before you go out and implement what you're going to do. And the first one of those areas is discipline. Look, I don't have to tell you, you know this, because they're really, really perceptive. They learn who's stricter, right? Mom or dad, who can be negotiated with, who enforces consequences and who doesn't, who overrides the other, who's the easiest to push around, right? When you're not aligned, your kids don't feel secure, they feel confused. Okay. So unity in this area means discussing how you're going to discipline your kids privately and then supporting each other publicly. When you need to make adjustments, you do that behind closed doors. You don't undermine each other. You don't let the kids manipulate. Go to mom, mom says yes, or mom says no. You go to dad, dad says yes, or the other way around. I mean, that's going to really divide you and your spouse. Really not healthy. Another area that you need unity on is decision making. And we're talking about the big decisions here. Things like schooling and boundaries and use of technology and activities. Those things should never rest on one parent alone. That it takes both of you to make these decisions. When one of you feels sidelined, you haven't been consulted at all, or you felt overruled, of course resentment's going to build then, right? Or if one of you feels burdened down by, every decision, you don't have any support from your spouse, you're going to feel burned out. So healthy parenting in this area sounds like we'll talk about it and we'll decide together. If it come to you, I'll talk with your dad. I'll talk with your mom. We make these decisions together. You know, that's how it goes. Even if it means that we're not making a decision right now, I'm waiting till your dad gets home. I'm waiting till your mom gets home. Okay. You do it together and consistently. That's the message that you're sending your kids. The third area that you need unity in is family leadership. Kids need to know who leads the home. And leadership isn't about who's in control or who's the most controlling. Knowing who leads in the home provides clarity and stability and consistency. Now, both mom and dad have leadership roles. Okay, the roles may look different from each other, but they are both leadership roles. I always say, family system is not a democracy, it's a benevolent dictatorship. Think about that for a moment. Are you running your home like a democracy? Is every vote, an equal vote? Shouldn't be. Shouldn't be that way at all. Uh, Mom and dad are in charge. You're in charge, not your kids. It's not that your kids don't get a vote, don't get an opinion, don't get to say what they want to need, but you are the grown up. You know what's best. You hopefully have the emotional maturity that your kids are years away from having. You have the life experience that they don't. The decisions they would make for themselves are based on all the wrong things. Okay, so they need that leadership, and they need to know what the rules are, and they need the consistency of those rules being firm. Now, I always like to just sort of pause for a moment and just say, look, if this is an issue in your home, if you realize that your parenting has pulled you and your spouse, let's just say into survival mode, where you're just functioning, but you're not really connecting, you might want to consider my high touch intensive program, Marriage in Bloom. Because yes, we can absolutely talk about parenting strategies that are going to realign the two of you. That's that's why it's not a cookie cutter program, because some people in the program don't have kids, some have adult kids who aren't in the home anymore, some some are still raising their kids. Every couple that comes into this program has unique needs. Okay. And if you're in a stage of life where you're still raising your kids and your world has started to really center around your kids, this is showing up in some way in your marriage that it's probably not showing up in a healthy way. So we got to strengthen that foundation. We've got to strengthen that marriage so that everything else flows from that, including the parenting. And if you want support with that, just reach out to me. Please reach out. DebbieCaudle.com/marriage and bloom. It's a 45 to 60-minute free call. That's a lot of time that I spend with you to find out what the specific issues that you're going through are and what your next steps are. Okay, let's keep going. All right. How do you protect your marriage in the midst of parenting chaos? One of the things I think I hear the most is we'll focus on us when things settle down. I'm thinking of a couple I'm working with right now who have significant marital problems, and their kids are about 3 to 5 years from being out of home, and they are just now beginning to see we're in trouble if we don't fix this marriage. There won't be a marriage after the kids are gone because we've made everything about the kids, and we barely know each other now. Do we even have anything in common? Well, parenting doesn't slow down on its own. You obviously have to be very intentional about how you show up for kids, but the marriage is the same way. Y I've talked in other episodes about this. You don't protect your marriage with grand gestures, the expensive vacation, the fine dining moments that, happen rarely. It's really the small but daily consistent things that you do that you have to do to stay connected. And, when you have kids, the reality is you've got to schedule it. I mean, you schedule everything else, and if you don't schedule it, it doesn't happen. So we're not talking about elaborate things. We're talking about check-ins, daily check-ins, weekly check-ins. If mornings are your thing, getting up before the kids and connecting then. If nighttime is when it needs to happen, after the kids go to bed. I once had a friend who she and her husband would put the kids earlier to bed than the kids really wanted and needed to go to bed. But they just flat out told the kids, "This is mommy and daddy time. You can read, you can, they let them be in their rooms still doing something, didn't have to be lights out, but the message they were sending to their kids was, "Hey, we've had time with you. You've had time with playing with each other and your friends. It's also important for mommy and daddy to have our time together. That is an important message to send to your kids. Another thing that you really have to be intentional about is keeping adult conversation alive. You can't just only be talking about logistical things. You want to make space for your thoughts, your feelings, your dreams and hopes, your frustrations, and obviously lots of room for humor. And it may seem like 10 minutes a day is just not enough, but sometimes 10 minutes of real conversation, real, not about the kids, not about work, not about the bills, just real conversation about you and me and us. All that, sometimes that's all it takes to just re-anchor the connection between the two of you. Okay. And I think another key here is you can't let your kids be the only bond you have. Just like I was referring to the couple I'm working with. What happens when the kids grow up and leave? What's left? Okay. Couples who survive parenting well are the ones who keep choosing each other all along the way. And ultimately, the reason to have a strong marriage, to prioritize a strong marriage, is because you're really giving a gift to your kids. Your kids don't need you to be perfect, but they do need you to have a secure marriage because a strong marriage teaches your kids what healthy partnership looks like, how conflict should be handled, the realistic nature of what love sounds like. You know, there's so many messages out there about what love is that's really false, you know? What movies portray, what books portray, what music portrays. You know as well as I do that that's just most of that just focuses on what it means to be in love, the feelings, but the day-to-day choices of showing up for each other and being loving is something very different. A strong marriage teaches children what respect looks like. Oh, so, so key, so important. This is how kids see warmth and teamwork and repair. And honestly, it's what teaches them how relationships actually work. Remember, Proverbs 22, verse 6 reminds us that training a child isn't just about instruction, it's also about environment. Okay? One of the greatest gifts you can give your kids is a marriage where love is visible. They can see it in the way that you guys prioritize each other, okay? And the way you protect the marital connection. So as we wrap up today, I just really want to encourage you. You know, you don't have to choose between I'm a good mom, I'm a good dad, or I'm a good spouse. One strengthens the other. Strong marriage, strong parenting. Your marriage isn't something to return to someday. It's something to tend now. And you know, I love the garden metaphor. You can't wait till the weeds have choked out everything that was beautiful about your marriage. Please don't wait. Because then you end up seeing me and then you make my life really complicated and difficult. So don't wait. Don't wait until the weeds are choking out everything beautiful. Start working on your marriage right now. When the weeds are small or medium size. All right. Hey, I'd love for you to leave a comment. Tell me what part of parenting has been the hardest on your marriage. And if you need help with that, remember you can reach out. Go to caudle.com/marriage and bloom. And, you know, if you know someone who could use this reminder, share this episode with them. Remember, you don't always have to be perfect. Uh, You can try. It doesn't hurt to try. But what's really, really key is that you go with the ball and keep going.